Hello everyone, welcome to our latest edition of the Cleveland Sports Show. I am your host, Darius Sethna. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your day, wherever you are, to tune in with myself. Logan Purcell will be joining us in a few minutes. We have a lot to break down this week. We're going to cover more Indians baseball, of course, but we're also going to get into some other topics. We're going to give you your sports fact of the day, of course. We're also going to talk about the Premier League. We'll get you ready for the Crew season. That's starting this weekend. Cavs, obviously, all NBA talk. We will be diving deep into that. Logan and I will also talk about the WNBA Draft that took place this past Thursday and what we can expect from some of these teams in the WNBA. We'll also, Browns fans, we're not clowning around, if you know what I mean. The new signing of Jadeveon Clowney has got Cleveland sports fans buzzing. We're going to break it all down for you. First, though, our intro. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of the one and only Cleveland Sports Show. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Darius Sethna of NordoniaHills.news, and the Cleveland Sports Show starts right now. Hello everyone, welcome to our latest edition of the Cleveland Sports Show. I am your host, Darius Sethna. As I mentioned a little bit, Logan Purcell will be joining us to talk some NBA basketball. We're going to get into the WNBA a little bit here, and we'll also dissect the Indians and this new Browns acquisition, Jadeveon Clowney. But first, it's, as always, time for your sports fact of the day. Today is April 17th, 2021, and this is a baseball fact we have for you this week. How fitting. And on April 17th, we're going to go all the way back to 1892. This is the first ever game played on a Sunday in National League history in Major League Baseball. The Cincinnati Reds, Ohio's own, defeat the St. Louis Browns by a final score of 5-1. Now, I did a little bit of research on the 1892 Cincinnati Reds, and they had a tremendous regular season record. They had a huge turnaround in 1 year. Their 1891 season was horrible. They finished with a record of 56-81. They fired their manager and replaced them with their first baseman. It was a mess in Cincinnati. But in 1892, only a year later, they turned it around. Their overall record was 82-68. They almost flipped their records and were even a game better. And in 1892, the Cincinnati Reds finished fifth place in the season standings in the National League. Some of the famous players on that Cincinnati Reds team, some of the pitchers include Dan Dwab, Frank Dwyer, Willie McGill, and George Rediger. Some of the famous catchers on the team, Tom Dowse, Jerry Harrington, and Morgan Murphy. Their manager in 1892 was Charlie Comiskey. So what a difference a year makes in this case for the Cincinnati Reds with a tremendous bounce-back season in 1892. Now, it's time for us to pause on baseball. But let's talk about some soccer for a little bit here. First, all you soccer fans, we're going to you know where we're heading, the Premier League in England. We need to talk about the standings and what's going on. Manchester City, about a week ago, they had a comfortable 14-point lead. However, they're only 11 points ahead now between them and second place Manchester United. Manchester City, 74 points on the season thanks to 23 wins, 5 draws, and 4 losses. Manchester United comes in at second place, as I mentioned. They have 18 wins, 9 draws, and 4 losses. Leicester City come in at third place. They have 17 wins, 5 draws, and 9 losses on the season thus far. West Ham, they come in at 4th place. They have 16 wins, 7 draws, and 9 losses for a combined total of 55 points. And to round out our top 5 in the Premier League this week, Chelsea round out that top 5 for us. They have 31 matches played so far. They have 15 wins, 9 draws, and 7 losses on the season. Let's get you updated with the stats so far in the Premier League. And Harry Kane, the first player this season in the league to hit the 20 goal margin. Kane now with 21 goals on the season, but Mohamed Salah is most likely going to get to that margin as well. He has 19 goals thus far, probably going to end, I would assume this week, going to get that 20th goal. He and Harry Kane are the top 2 scorers in the Premier League. However, Bruno Fernandes is not far behind them. The Manchester United player with 16 goals on the season for 3rd place, and then tied for 4th place include Dominic Calvert-Lewin, Patrick Bamford, and Son Heung-min. Each of those players with 14 goals on the season. Harry Kane also still leading the league in assists. 13 assists on the season so far for Kane. Bruno Fernandes of Manchester City is getting the goals and the assists. He is tied for 2nd place in assists with 11. Kevin De Bruyne of Manchester City tied with Fernandes, also with 11. Jack Grealish and Son Heung-min round out the top 5 for you in assists. Grealish of Aston Villa with 10 assists on the season, and then Son Heung-min of Tottenham Hotspur with 9 assists. Upcoming matches this week in the Premier League. We've already had a couple matches for our match day 32 of 38. Everton took on Tottenham Hotspur yesterday. That was a 2-2 draw, and quite an exciting game, actually. Harry Kane, with both the goals for Tottenham Hotspur, scored one in the 27th minute to give them a 1-0 lead. However, only 4 minutes later, Jofi Sigurdsson, Swedish player, with a 31st minute penalty conversion, and we were tied at 1-1. So we had 4 goals in this game, but only 2 scorers. And I just mentioned those 2 scorers were Kane and Sigurdsson. And Kane actually scored as well in the second half to tie the game after Everton took a 2-1 lead thanks to a 62nd minute goal by Sigurdsson. So this game finishes, each team received a point with this 2-2 draw. We actually had a game finish up today as well. Newcastle defeated West Ham 3-2. West Ham actually had to play down a player. Craig Dawson in the 36th minute received a red card. So for the majority of this game, West Ham was playing down a man. Now, let's get into the upcoming schedule for the Premier League this weekend. Today at 3:15, we have the Wolves taking on Sheffield United. Arsenal will be going up against Fulham. That'll kick off our slate of games tomorrow. The second game tomorrow will be at 11 a.m. It'll be Manchester United going up against Burnley. A couple of games this Monday and Tuesday as well. This upcoming Monday, April 19th, Leeds United will be going up against Liverpool. 3 p.m. will be the kickoff time for that game. And then Chelsea going up against Brighton on Tuesday, same time, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's head out back home to the U.S. and talk about some MLS soccer, get you ready for the season. We had a couple of games take place already yesterday. Houston Dynamo defeating San Jose by a final score of 2-1. Houston went up 2-0 in this game, and then a 74th minute goal by Paul Marie gave San Jose, they put San Jose on the board, but it was just not enough as the Dynamo defeat San Jose by a final score of 2-1. Also, Seattle Sounders, who Crew fans were destroyed by the Columbus Crew in this year's MLS Cup final all the way back in December. Well, guess what? Seattle took care of business against Minnesota last night. 4-0 win for Seattle. 2 goals by Raul Ruidiaz, an 86th minute goal by Freddie Montero, and then in the first half, Paulo Mayor in the 49th minute scored the opening goal of the game. So this might be a little bit scary because Seattle might be coming out with some ideas of revenge this season after what happened to them in last year's MLS Cup final. Now, Crew fans, the season for Columbus begins this Sunday. Tomorrow, actually, is when I mean this Sunday. April 18th, 5:30 p.m. is when it all kicks off. They will be hosting the Philadelphia Union in their new arena. That is going to be awesome. I'm so excited to see what this Crew team has in store for us this year. The other Ohio soccer team, which is FC Cincinnati, who haven't been as relevant as the Crew, but are hoping to make a push this season. They will be on the road to kick off their season. It's actually today, April 17th. It'll be at 8:30 p.m., as I mentioned, against Nashville. So current standings right now, because Seattle and Houston were the only teams to play last night, they lead the Western Conference. Still, we have a lot of games to be played in the Eastern Conference. We'll see how these tables shape in a week's time. We'll be back with you to talk about the Crew and their next opening couple of games next week in our next edition of the Cleveland Sports Show. So super excited to be talking about all of that with you. And ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our soccer news for this week. Now it's time to get into some NBA basketball. I am very excited to bring Logan Purcell onto the show. And here he is, ladies and gentlemen, back with us for another weekly episode. Logan Purcell, an Nordonia freshman. Logan, thank you so much for being with us this week. How's your week been going so far?
It's been a good week. Yours?
It's been going pretty well. I've been excited to see the Eastern Conference standings being a little bit more competitive. We have the Celtics winning 5 in a row. The New York Knicks are relevant. They've won 5 games in a row. But let's talk about our hometown team first. The Cleveland Cavaliers, who had a rocky week this week, Logan. They had a couple of solid performances. They had 3 games in between our 2 episodes these last couple of weeks. Their record in those 3 games were 1-2. Let's get you caught up with what happened. So this past Sunday, the Cavs hosted the New Orleans Pelicans. Zion Williamson, Brandon Ingram, and company rolled into Cleveland, and this was a competitive game, and the Cavs looked very strong right from the tip. And after the first quarter, Logan, they had a 39-29 lead. But then this game just continued to slip away from them. New Orleans would outscore them in the rest of the quarters in the second, third, and fourth. Brandon Ingram would finish with 27 points in 36 minutes. Zion Williamson, New Orleans star, 38 points, 9 rebounds, and 4 assists. He was just dominant in the paint. He has been a beast this season after having those injury problems last year. On the Cavs' side, Kevin Love with one of his stronger performances of the year with 19 points in 31 minutes. Isaac Okoro with his largest scoring output thus far as a member of the Cavs had 19 points in 30 minutes. This is a game where the Cavs did not have Colin Sexton or Darius Garland, and they still kept it competitive for the entire game. But I think here, Logan, it was more of just talent, bona fide talent winning the game. In my analysis, I believe New Orleans has more talent than the Cleveland Cavaliers, and towards the end of the game, that really showed.
Yeah, I mean, Zion Williamson is a bona fide superstar, and he is going to be one of the best he's going to be one of the best young players that we're going to have in this league. But I mean, when it comes down to it, the Cavs don't have their 2 best players, and you can argue Kevin Love, you can argue Dean Wade at times, you can argue Isaac Okoro, but Darius Garland and Colin Sexton are the 2 leaders of this Cavalier team.
Absolutely, yeah.
And losing both of those guys in this game was, in fact, a huge loss. But the fact that they were able to keep it a game is quite impressive, actually. And I think Kevin Love showed some light. But to me, it's just nice to have a little bit of Kevin Love, a little bit of money being used and not wasted away on the bench. So I think the Cavs did a really good job of keeping it a game. And as you said, I think just they had a very electrifying first quarter up by 10.
Yeah.
But, that fourth quarter was pretty pathetic, only getting 15 points in the final period.
Right.
I mean, you got to do better than that, especially against a team, we can praise these Pelicans all we want, but no one is ever going to say they are a defensive-minded team, because they're not. No. It's a grind the ball, grind the paint, get inside and work, but it's not a defensive team.
Yeah.
So to me, only scoring 15 points, even without your two best scorers, is not anything to laugh about.
Yeah, and Cavs, Logan, as I mentioned, we were talking about this, kept this game competitive, and they just had to hang. They unfortunately had to hang their heads on that one, but this past Wednesday they went to Charlotte at the Spectrum Center, Charlotte, North Carolina, and took care of business against the Hornets. Now, Charlotte did not have LaMelo Ball in this game, but they did have Devontae Graham, Terry Rozier, Bismack Biyombo, and Miles Bridges. And this was a game where I was very impressed with the Cavs overall. Unlike their game against New Orleans, the Cavs actually outscored Charlotte in every single quarter. The highest output they had was 28 points in the fourth quarter. On the Cavs' side, Kevin Love, another strong performance, Logan. A double-double with 17 points and 11 rebounds. Jared Allen returned from his concussion protocol. He's had 15 points in 30 minutes to go along with 8 rebounds. So a strong bounce-back performance for Jared Allen. And then Darius Garland returned. He had 17 points in 36 minutes. He really looks good to me, Logan, at handling the point guard, handling the ball at that point guard position. And then Taurean Prince, how about this, Logan? Taurean Prince, 25 points in 29 minutes, only 3 assists. And the Cavs didn't, it was Taurean Prince's mindset was scoring. And you can see that with the 25 points and the 3 assists, that 22 differential. So I really was impressed. Taurean Prince's shooting stroke has looked very strong this week. What were your thoughts on this Cavs victory in Charlotte? They won this game by a final score of 103-90. The Hornets only had a lead in this game very briefly in the third quarter. The Cavs really had control of this game for the majority of the match. So what were your thoughts on this Cavs win in Charlotte?
I think it was a very impressive performance, as you mentioned. I mean, it wasn't like we see a lot of wins in the NBA today. A team will have a 20-point quarter, like a 20-point lead in a quarter, and they just kind of ride that the rest of the game. This Cavs team consistently put up numbers. They consistently played defense, and the Hornets didn't score over 25 points in a quarter.
Yeah.
So I think defensively they were all over them. I think Taurean Prince had a fantastic performance, and I think, even without Colin Sexton, I think, again, they performed really well. Kevin Love, like I said earlier, I think his field goal shooting in the prior game, I believe he shot 6 of 17. When we were talking about the Pelicans game, he shot 6 of 12.
Yeah.
So not only is he continuing to perform, but he's also doing it more and more efficiently as games go on. And I think Jared Allen coming back also is definitely, there's a story there. And, how I think every Cleveland fan is excited to see him back on the floor for the Cavs.
How did you feel about Larry Nance Jr. returning as well? In that game against Charlotte, Logan, he had only 5 points in 20 minutes, but he's, obviously a little bit of a rough patch, being his first game back in a while. But I definitely feel that Larry Nance Jr.'s presence on this Cavs team is going to make a difference moving forward. How do you feel about Larry Nance and how he can deal with this injury, as well as have a good impact with the team as they continue their season?
I think Larry Nance, I think you hit it right on the head. I think he is a locker room presence, very similar to what Matthew Dellavedova provides for Cleveland. I think that it's a very, very athletic forward that can provide some scoring off the bench for the Cavs. But I'm interested to see if he can still get the same jump, still get the same run. He's a very solid rim runner at that.
Right.
I'll put him up there with, at his best when he's healthy, he's one of the best role players in the NBA, in my opinion. And I think he needs to figure out a way to continue to make an impact on this team even after the injury.
He had a phenomenal start to the season as well, Logan. He actually, at one point, at the beginning of the season, was leading the league in just overall deflections. He was very active on the defensive end. The Cavs were not active on the defensive end, though, this past Thursday when the Golden State Warriors came to town. This game was played in Cleveland at the Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse, and the Cavs had a very strong start to this game, Logan. Steph Curry and Draymond Green both played for the Golden State Warriors, and they showcased their brilliance once again. As I mentioned, Cavs had a very strong start. They were up by as many as 11, but then it all crumbled apart and collapsed very quickly. I was very surprised. Usually the Cavs have their collapse in the third quarter when they lose a game. This collapse came early. It came in the second quarter, Logan. The Golden State Warriors outscored the Cavs 35-21 alone in the second quarter. And guess what? Stephen Curry in the first half was 0 for 5 from three-point range. I mean, he could not find the bottom of the rim of the hoop in that first half. He caught fire, though, in the second half. He finished the game with 33 points in 35 minutes. Draymond Green finished the game with 5 points, but he did have 10 rebounds and 8 assists. And Andrew Wiggins was fantastic, Logan. 23 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists for Wiggins as well. Juan Toscano-Anderson, who's been a great story in the NBA thus far. He had 20 points and 7 rebounds, Logan. A couple of these names I'm mentioning, Logan, these are not all-star players whatsoever, like Juan Toscano-Anderson, Andrew Wiggins, Kevon Looney had 8 points, Jordan Poole had 14 points. To me, at some point, it was really just the Cavs, in my opinion, they really just gave up this game. Now, Colin Sexton and Darius Garland combined for 50 points for the Cavs, but outside of that, Jared Allen was the leading scorer with their third leading scorer with 17 points. Kevin Love only with 5 points in 22 minutes. This was just overall, I think, a very disappointing performance for the Cavs. And what really shocked me was how early they gave up their lead. What were your thoughts on this, Logan?
I think it was pretty bad. It was an awful second quarter, as you mentioned, 35-21. But I mean, I break it down to this point. There are some games where it's just not the Cavs' fault. And in my opinion, watching the game, I mean, we all have heard, anybody who watches the NBA has heard about the kind of tears Stephen Curry is putting up. It is the best 9-game run of his NBA career.
Yeah, he's the all-time Warriors leading scorer now when he had 53 this past week. He's been sensational.
And that's what I'm saying. 53, 42, 33. This guy is tearing it up. To me, if this Warriors team was winning games, he'd be in the MVP running. Because they're not winning games, I can't really do that.
Well, I mean, they're 500. I mean, they're 28-28. I mean, I would definitely argue they would not be 28-28 without him. So I could see him being in an MVP conversation.
For sure, I would put him top 5, but I mean, top 3, you're talking about Harden, Jokic, maybe Embiid, but all those teams are top 5 in their conference. So to me, I don't know if it's an argument. Yeah. You could definitely make a debate. But going back to the Cavs, I mean, I am confident, and I feel a little bit of pride, actually. A lot of the guys coming back for Cleveland recently off their injuries have underperformed. Jared Allen had a solid performance coming back, but it wasn't great.
Yeah.
Only 8 rebounds, and he came back 15-8. Colin Sexton puts up 30.
Yeah.
10 of 19 shooting on his way back. That gives me a little bit of a little bit of excitement. I feel like maybe he's taking another step. Consistency is what he's finding, which is something that he really needed. I think Jared Allen's 14 rebounds is something to be pretty happy about, but the bench is just awful.
Yeah, it was terrible.
Of the Warriors, you talked about Juan Toscano-Anderson and all these guys, but if you look at the numbers, you can go back, go to any Warriors, look at their schedule, look at each game, look at the box score on their bench. In the games that they lose, nobody scores above 5 points. In the games that they win, 1 or 2 people score 15 and above.
Yeah.
So it's hot and cold. Somebody steps up and gets hot. With Juan Toscano-Anderson, it's not like he took 30 shots. He shot 8 of 9.
Yeah.
So he was just hot. This Cavs bench these two teams are so similar. Minus Steph Curry, obviously.
Right.
They're so similar. I mean, Wiggins is very comparable to Jared Allen. I think, you can compare, James Wiseman and Draymond Green when they're healthy to Darius Garland, sort of. Colin Sexton is not comparable to Steph Curry, but it's close enough. I mean...
And then franchise players.
They're very solid. But the benches are basically identical. So in this particular situation, I'm not going to harp on them too much, but it's just that this bench needs to find some consistency.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they are going to be in a whirlwind of trouble.
Yes, and you're definitely hit the nail in the coffin there, Logan, because the Cavs have quite a few road games coming up. The upcoming schedule for the Cavs, today they are in Chicago. They're going to be taking on the Bulls. This will be the first time in the week they'll be seeing the Bulls. They'll actually see them twice this week. Cavs will be in Chicago tonight for a matchup with the Bulls, and then this upcoming Wednesday, the Bulls will be here in Cleveland at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse to take on the Cavs. In between those Cavs-Bulls matchups, the Cavs will head to Detroit to take on the Pistons. That game will be Monday, April 19th at 7 p.m. Cavs played Detroit early on in the season in December. That game was in Detroit, and they won that game in overtime. It was a great performance by the Cavs, actually a 2-overtime game. As I mentioned, Bulls will then come to Cleveland for a matchup with the Cavs Wednesday, April 21st at 7 p.m. Cavs will then begin a 3-game road trip. They'll go back to Charlotte this upcoming Friday for a matchup with the Hornets. They'll then go to our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., to take on the Wizards, and then they will conclude their 3-game road trip against the Toronto Raptors. That will be a road game. So, Logan, based off of this week, who's been your top performer for the Cavs for this week? You know, Taurean Prince had a great couple of games, but he wasn't that great against the Warriors this past Thursday. You know, Jared Allen, having missed quite a bit of games, has come out and has looked pretty decent. Hasn't been the best version of himself, obviously, but he's come in and been very serviceable. You know, you mentioned Colin Sexton putting up 30 points after, being out for the last 2 games. So who's your standout player this week for the Cavs?
Well, I mean, my standout player doesn't necessarily have to be the player that I think played the best. For me, standout can mean either the best, or it can also mean who just made your eyes pop a little bit.
Yeah.
Who, make look a second time, and to me, that name has to be Kevin Love.
Yes.
The one game that we did not mention was the Cavs absolutely getting popped by the Raptors on the 10th on Saturday. And Gary Trent Jr. drops 44, but Kevin Love gives up 18 on 4 of 9 shooting in 20 minutes of play.
Yeah.
And Kevin Love, minus this Golden State game, which was a quite disappointment for everybody besides Sexton and Garland, Kevin Love has played very well. I don't believe he's scored under 17 besides that Warriors game. He has had a very solid week of performances, and I hope this is something that we're going to continue to see out of him, because if it is, like I said earlier, I think it'll not be as big of a waste of money as it has been so far.
Yeah, and this is going to be, as I mentioned, Logan, this is going to be a big test this upcoming week for the Cavs. You know, they have the Bulls who are not, they're going to be seeing the Bulls twice, as I mentioned, and the Bulls are competing now. They really want, with this acquisition of Nikola Vucevic, Chicago's pushing, and they have a bit of a chip on their shoulder, and they're going to be seeing the Hornets again. So, and the Hornets are going to have that loss from this week fresh in their minds this upcoming Friday when the Cavs go to Charlotte. Let's talk about other news going around in the NBA, Logan. So Brooklyn Nets player LaMarcus Aldridge, let's talk about that, unfortunately has retired. But I think this was the best decision for Aldridge to make after, he's been dealing with some irregular heartbeat problems for almost over a decade now. But LaMarcus Aldridge, when you think about his career, it was absolutely amazing. He averaged, almost 20 points per game. His seasons with the Trailblazers and with the Spurs were what I remember most, especially with the Spurs. I think he was a great fit there in San Antonio when they had Kawhi Leonard and Ginobili and Parker still. That 2017 Spurs team was a terrific team, and that's when Aldridge averaged about 23 points per game. So, Logan, I'll ask you this. What do you remember the most, or what stands out to you the most about LaMarcus Aldridge's amazing career?
I think you are 100% correct. I think that he was a fantastic player in San Antonio. I think he would have made a fairly decent impact, in Brooklyn off the bench, or even if he was the start. But more than anything, I remember him playing with the young Damian Lillard in Portland.
Yeah.
And the 1 or 2 years that he was there with him, I think it was some of the biggest improvements and biggest steps in Damian Lillard's career. I think LaMarcus Aldridge was an all-star player then. He was an all-star player in San Antonio, and I probably would have to agree with you. I remember the San Antonio days when he would play against the Cavs and Kyrie, and they'd go head-to-head.
Yeah.
He'd play in a post on LeBron. I used to love to watch those games. And LaMarcus Aldridge's career high, I believe it was 53. You think now, LaMarcus Aldridge was never really a shooter, but
right.
still found a way to put up ridiculous numbers.
Yeah.
And I think it's definitely something to look at, maybe possibly in the next couple of years, maybe looking at a Hall of Fame ballot.
Yeah, and it's, what a tremendous career. You were talking about it, too. I really loved your point about how LaMarcus Aldridge was almost like a mentor to Damian Lillard. As you mentioned, Dame time really began under LaMarcus Aldridge and Damian Lillard. I remember when Damian Lillard hit that amazing shot back in 2014 against the Rockets to close out the series. That was the first time the Blazers had won a playoff series since that 1999-2000 series when they made that conference finals run all against Kobe and Shaq and the Lakers. But, going back to LaMarcus Aldridge, just really a very solid player, very fundamental player. I think he could have been a terrific player even back in the 1990s or even the 80s. Just the way he played, very old school game. So, but I definitely think this is the best decision he made because, I was talking to a friend about this too, Logan. What if something happened to him on the court, and, he could have, ended his life. So I think this was the best decision for him, and I'm very happy seeing the career he had. Let's get into a little bit more NBA news, Logan, here. We're going to talk about Donovan Mitchell, who got injured last night. So this is a big setback for the Utah Jazz. Obviously, Donovan Mitchell has been having a terrific year. He's been averaging about 27 points per game. But he got hurt last night against the Indiana Pacers. How do you feel this setback is going to hurt Utah? Because we've been talking about Utah, Logan. They have so many different great players. Obviously, Rudy Gobert, you have Jordan Clarkson, you have Bogdanovich, you have Ingles. So it's not like the Jazz are losing all those guys. They're obviously losing their centerpiece. How do you think this is going to impact Utah going forward and maintaining that 1 seed in the Western Conference?
Well, I think it is a huge loss for Utah. I think, in my opinion, you could easily make the argument that alongside Devin Booker, Donovan Mitchell is one of the most underrated players in the NBA right now.
Yes.
None of us have seen him truly play in the playoffs, minus the bubble. He hasn't gone past the first round, I don't believe. And I think the one time that I remember him in the playoffs, when he truly made a difference, was that round 1 series in the bubble against that Nuggets team that ended up going to the conference finals, beating the Clippers. But he absolutely showed up and showed out.
Yeah.
He is a superstar in this league. He is going to be one of the best players to continue to play. And he is one of the youngest superstars that I've seen in a while. You can make the argument he's right alongside a guy like Tatum, a guy like Brown. He's right there with those guys.
Yeah.
And I think it is probably the worst thing that could have happened to this Utah Jazz team.
Well, how do you think, Logan, do you believe that Utah can still hold on to the first seed in the Western Conference despite the loss of Donovan Mitchell? Because right now, Phoenix is only a game and a half behind them. And, the Clippers aren't going anywhere despite a loss last night to the Sixers. You obviously still have Denver. We have to see what the Lakers do with LeBron once LeBron and AD get back. So how confident are you that the Jazz can keep that 1 seed in this very, very competitive Western Conference?
Well, with that 1 seed, I'm not super confident about it. We all know, you look at the last 10 games, Phoenix is on a tear. They're 9-1.
Yeah.
They are only a half behind, as you mentioned. This team is something to mess around with. This is no joke. This is a really solid Suns team that is showing up in the regular season, 40-15 to this point. They're having a great year. But based on the news that I've heard, Donovan Mitchell might not be out for too long. I believe it will be a little bit, a couple weeks, I believe, is what I've heard.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's going to be like the couple of months that Anthony Davis is out. They're going to have to win. I think there's going to be some role players that need to step up. Jordan Clarkson, Bogdanovich, Gobert needs to play well. Guys like that, they need to step up. But I'm not too worried about the Clippers, personally. I think they're a solid team and they're playing well, but they're a little bit inconsistent from my eyes.
Yeah.
I think the biggest worry is the Suns, but I don't really see Utah dropping past a 4 seed because the the Lakers, again, you mentioned it, LeBron's out, AD's out.
Yeah.
Denver is 6 games behind.
Right.
So I'm not too worried about it. I think Utah's going to win some games. I mean, the upcoming schedule isn't very difficult. We already mentioned, the Lakers and how they're a bit down with LeBron and AD out, and really they're not the same team, clearly.
Right.
They play them back in 2 straight games. Then they go play a terrible Houston team. Then they play Minnesota twice. This is a lot of winnable games, even without the likes of Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah.
So I'm not too concerned about it. And like I said, I don't really see them dropping past a 4 seed, even if they were to drop.
Yeah, and, this Utah team has a lot of different... what I love about this team, they have a little bit of everything. They have bench scoring, they've got shooting, they've got an elite center, they've got guys who can, create for themselves. They have an excellent coach in Quinn Snyder. So I definitely have confidence in the Utah Jazz as well. We'll see how it goes for them these next couple of weeks without Donovan Mitchell. Logan, that concludes our NBA news for this week, but I want to keep us on the basketball topic of things. The WNBA Draft took place this past Thursday, and the Dallas Wings, via the New York Liberty, had the number 1 overall pick, and they select a center from Texas, Charlie Collier, and then with the second overall pick, Dallas also secured Awak Courier, center and forward from Finland. The Atlanta Dream selected Ari McDonald, a point guard out of Arizona, and with the 4th pick, the Indiana Fever select Kirsi Gondrezic, a forward from a forward from West Virginia. I apologize very much if I am butchering these names. We were talking about this too, Logan. The names here are a little bit difficult to pronounce, but this is an incredible WNBA draft. I'm very excited. Lots of talent here on the floor with a lot of these ladies. Who do you think is going to be the standout rookie heading into this WNBA season?
I think, Awak, the number 2 overall pick, has a really solid opportunity. I know you mentioned Charlie Collier, the 6'5" center out of Texas. He was fantastic. 19 points, 11 rebounds.
Yeah.
Second most double-doubles in Division I college basketball. But, from Finland, another 6'5" center. This team is in desperate need of front court, but I think that this one is going to she's got a really solid combination of size, athleticism, and her mind kind of reminds me of the way Chris Paul plays. She just sees the floor so well, and it's very impressive how she just seems to know what's going to go on before it even happens.
Yeah.
And I think that it's going to be very, very interesting to watch someone of this size and athleticism play for a team that needs it badly. And I think that Charlie is also a very solid pickup, but I just think that the number 2 pick out of Finland is going to be a little bit more useful in the first season than Collier.
Yeah, this is going to be a very interesting WNBA season. This is the 25th anniversary of the WNBA, so that's going to be an awesome celebration. Also, Logan, I want to talk about the Dallas Wings because they had 3 of the first 5 picks in this year's WNBA draft. Well, what push do you expect the Dallas Wings to make for this upcoming season? How do you expect them to possibly compete for a championship? What are their odds?
Well, you got a lot of rookies. If those rookies can perform, they've got a chance. I mean, they did have the 3 of the top 5 picks in the draft for a reason. So, they're not a bad team. They do still have a 23 points per game player in Enrique. But,
right.
She's a very talented veteran, but they need to work a little bit on that front court, which they definitely cleaned up interior with these 2 big centers. But I think that they've got a solid chance chance, but, I mean, it's going to be really hard to beat the likes of Brianna Stewart and Sue Bird over at Seattle Storm.
Yeah, and, as I mentioned, this Dallas Wings team, as you mentioned, too, lots of rookies. We'll see how their season plays out. The WNBA season, as I mentioned, 25th season, will begin in about a month, Friday, May 14th, with a weekend of action. All 12 teams are going to play on that weekend. The television schedule will be announced in the upcoming weeks. So, Logan, we'll be talking a lot more about the WNBA as tip-off for the season gets closer. Obviously, the Seattle Storm, the defending WNBA champions. So we'll get into all the matches. We'll break down the box score once the season begins. Only a month away. Friday, May 14th is when the WNBA season begins. Logan, let's get geared back towards Cleveland sports. Let's talk about the Indians here for a little bit. So Indians have had a kind of a bittersweet week this week. They lost this past Monday to the Chicago White Sox by a final score of 4-3. That was the first of 4 matches against Chicago. Indians then beat Chicago this past Tuesday by a final score of 2-0. And this was the game everyone was talking about. This game on Wednesday, April 14th, game 3 of 4 between the Indians and White Sox. And here it is, Logan. Indians had a lot of at-bats. I'm looking at this at-bat column right now, easily more than 10. But guess what? No hits whatsoever for the Indians in this loss against the Chicago White Sox. They were down big early in the first inning. They were down 6-0 after the first inning, down 8-0 after the third inning. Thankfully, Chicago didn't pour it on anymore because this 8-0 deficit was not a great look for the Indians this past Wednesday. However, Cleveland did bounce back. They defeated the White Sox in their final matchup. 4-2 was the final score this past Thursday. But then the Indians went to Cincinnati to take on the Reds on another road game and didn't look great. They got trounced by a final score of 10-3, Logan. After taking a 1-0 lead after the second inning, Indians give up 7 runs alone in the third inning. So we look at this week, Logan. Obviously, you have that game where the Indians have no hits. But then there are games, they're giving in that same game where they had no hits. They gave up 6 runs alone in the first inning. And then that game against Cincinnati, they gave up 7 alone in the third. So it seems like the Indians are having just one inning defensively where they're just not getting the job done. And that seems to be costing them the game. What are your thoughts on this week for the Indians, Logan?
I think it's been a perfect portrayal of the entire start to the season, to be honest with you. I mean, the first 4 games, they were 3-1. So, I mean, they were really inconsistent. Then they won 4 straight. Now they're 2-2 in the past 4.
Yeah.
Or, excuse me, 3-2 in the past 5, I should say.
Yeah.
Is what the games we're talking about. But the biggest problem with this team that I've noticed is they just cannot stop rally. I mean, you can't give up 7 runs. You can give up 2. But, I mean, and most of them, they're with 1 or 2 outs.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like, they get a hit and then they just rally 5 straight hits with no outs.
Right.
Most of it is, they'll get the first out of the inning. They'll get a hit. They'll get a guy on. They'll get another out. And then it's a rally, 2-out rally. And it just keeps on pouring it on. But it's just seemingly as if they cannot figure it out. And even the game, when they won 2-0 in 10 innings, Shane Bieber pitched 9.
Yeah.
Because he was just performing. He did his thing. They were able to win it in the 10th. But, I mean, unless the pitcher goes 9 innings, they just have no chance. I mean, against the Reds, they just got smoked in the third inning. 7 runs. That's just unbelievable. It's just the inconsistency by the bats, the pitching. They've been shut out twice this week.
And
that's just... That is just unacceptable.
Yeah, I definitely feel your pain, Logan. It's been a rough week for the Indians. Looking at the standings, Logan, we look at the American League Central Division. The Indians are still 7-6, so they still have a winning record. It does not feel like they have a winning record at all. Kansas City is first in the American League Central Division. They have 7 wins, 4 losses. The Indians are 3-5 on the road. If they want to have a competitive season, they have to be able to win some games on the road. obviously. The Indians' schedule continues today against the Cincinnati Reds. This will be game 2 of 3 in Cincinnati between the Indians and the Reds. The Indians will then return home to they'll then return home to Progressive Field for a matchup with the White Sox. 2 matchups with the White Sox, actually. This will be 2 games out of the, let me count it here, because they have a lot of home games coming up. So they include against the White Sox, the Yankees, and the Twins. So what do you expect the Indians to be able to do against these teams, Logan? Obviously, you have to finish out your series with the Reds, but then you've got, quality teams like Chicago. The Yankees are always, a tough outing. And then you have the Minnesota Twins, who, have been a very competitive team these last couple of years. So your thoughts on what the Indians have to do in their next few games?
Well, aside from the, as you mentioned, the finishing up the Cincinnati series, and I'm going to, it's only a 2-game series against this White Sox team. We've played them before. It's, again, an inconsistent couple of games against them. We're 2-2 so far. But, I would like to see the Indians take at least 50%, if not more, against the Yankees and the Twins.
Yeah.
If you look at the standings, just refer to the standings, both of those teams have way underperformed this year. Way underperformed. The Yankees are at the bottom. They're at the bottom of their division, I believe. They're pretty close. Yeah, they're at the bottom of their division. They're 5-8.
Yeah.
And the Twins aren't much better at 6-8. These are definitely teams that have not played to their potential. So I think the Indians need to take them out. Neither the Yankees nor the Twins can get their bats popping yet. Neither have found consistent pitching. The Indians got to take these ones. These are gimme games. The teams are not playing well. They've got to win at least 50% of those games.
Yeah, and upcoming schedule for the Indians, as I mentioned, 4:10 today, they'll be going up against the Reds. Tomorrow at 1:10, their final game in Cincinnati against the Reds. They'll then return home. Tuesday, April 20th, is when their homestand begins at 6:10 against the White Sox. Same time, same place against the White Sox on Wednesday as well, 6:10 p.m. against Chicago. Logan, let's get a little bit more into baseball here for a little bit. Outside the Indians, let's just look at the MLB as a whole right now. Who has been the team that has shocked you the most? I know we're only, about 13, 14 games into the season, but which team has been that surprise team for you so far?
Well, there's 2 of them. I think, number one, the smaller surprise, but still a surprise. Everybody knows the Dodgers are real. That's a good team. It's a very good team. They were one of my picks to go to the World Series this year, but they're 12-2.
Yeah.
They are fantastic. There is no error there. They are just performing. The pitching is fantastic. The batting is just ridiculous. This team is absolutely loaded. They are having a great year. But to me, an even bigger surprise, I don't think anybody, after losing Mookie Betts, expected the Boston Red Sox to be 9-4.
Right.
At this point in the season. Again, I know we're only 13 games in the season for them, but 9-4 is very good, and they're atop the AL East, atop teams like Toronto and Baltimore, and even Tampa Bay and the Yankees. Both Tampa Bay and the Yankees also underperforming, surprisingly enough, but I would take Boston's winning even more surprising.
Yeah.
Because from Rafael Devers, who is he had a great year last year, but he's been inconsistent so far. Rafael Devers, Xander Bogaerts has had a great start to the year. I think that this team has a chance to make some moves if they can figure out to continue to be consistent enough in the AL.
Yeah, and what's surprising about the Red Sox too, Logan? They're 6-1 on the road, but they're 3-3 at home. They actually have a much better road record than they do a home record. Well, Logan, speaking on the Red Sox, what do you see them doing? Do you think that they can continue this hot hand, or do you think that teams are going to start improving as the season goes on, and we won't be talking about the Red Sox as much?
Well, I think it could go either way, but I think the one thing that they're doing a bit more than other teams is, I talked about how your starting pitchers need to give you some innings. They need to be able to run and get you long, but this team has a lot of quality starting pitchers.
Yeah.
Nathan Eovaldi is one of them. They've got a lot of guys. I mean, even Matt Barnes as a relief guy is very solid. They have a lot of pitchers who can give you solid innings. I mean, as I've mentioned, they've got some inconsistent bats that can give you hot games. Rafael Devers, Christian Arroyo. They've got a lot of guys. Xander Bogaerts has had a fantastic year, but I think that this team, if they can keep it going, I don't think that this is a team that's just going to get off the board of being talked about because they've been so hot to this point.
And, I'm very excited to see how both the American League and National League standings play out. We'll see if the Yankees can get out of their slump. We'll see how the Indians fare against some of the more disappointing but still very competitive teams of Major League Baseball. Now that wraps up our baseball news for this week, Logan. Let's get into our final segment of the show today. We're going to talk about the Cleveland Browns, arguably Cleveland's most popular sports team right now after that amazing season they had finally getting to the playoffs. They got to the divisional round, lost to Kansas City, and we were talking about all season long last year, Logan. It was defense, defense, defense. But right now, the Browns have just added another huge piece to the puzzle. And I said in my intro to the show that they weren't clowning around with this decision because they got Jadeveon Clowney, Logan. This is a huge acquisition for the Browns. Clowney, last season with the Tennessee Titans, finished with 19 tackles and a total of 5 assisted tackles. This is a guy who is only 28 years old, but can still bring it on the defensive end. I'm very excited about this signing, Logan. How do you feel Clowney and Myles Garrett now, both on the defensive side of the ball, are going to help this Browns team for this upcoming season?
I think it's going to be very challenging for opposing teams to be able to give their quarterback time and even the running back holes to run through. But I still am on that point where the Browns need to start thinking about that middle linebacker position. I understand trying to bona fide your inside, bona fide your group, your pass rush, but this linebacker core is probably one of the weakest in the NFL. And that is going to end up coming back to bite them, I think, come playoff time, if they don't figure out a way to make some moves. And also, the releasing of Sheldon Richardson is something that is definitely worth a conversation because they add Jadeveon Clowney and then lose their best inside guy. So they've got a lot of interesting moves that have been going on right now. I think Jadeveon Clowney is a huge pickup. I am a little bit concerned with the injuries that he's had along his career.
Right.
He's been a little bit distant, especially for the Titans and the Seahawks when he was first drafted. But I think it's a good pickup. I still am not super confident in this team until they figure out that linebacker position.
Do you feel that they've improved their defense with this signing of Clowney? Because, you were talking about, the other losses that they've had. How do you feel that, do you believe that Jadeveon Clowney can come in and still help this defense be better than they were last year?
Yeah, I do think he's going to make a pretty solid impact on this team because, we talked about it when, they were flirting with the idea of J.J. Watt. Myles Garrett comes on one side, you double team him, you've got a very, very effective pass rusher on his own, much less with, the A-plus superstar that is Myles Garrett coming at the other side.
Yeah. And I'm just very excited to see how the Browns play out their defense, especially in a tough AFC North, really. Let's think about the AFC North here real quick, Logan, because, I was speaking with some friends about it this week at school. I think the Bengals are going to finish at the bottom again. I still think they have some developing to do. To me, Logan, the AFC North is about the Browns and the Ravens. I have family who live in Pittsburgh, and I'm very sorry to tell them this, but I think the Steelers' reign of the AFC North is over. In my eyes, I really don't see the Steelers finishing better than 500. But I look at the Ravens, it's going to be between them and the Browns, I believe. And I think the Browns have a much more well-balanced offense than the Baltimore Ravens do. So, your opinions on the AFC North, Logan, do you think it's really between the Browns and Baltimore now, or can the other two teams possibly make this interesting?
Well, I mean, let's not even joke around with the idea of the Bengals. The Bengals are going to suck. I know it's kind of a bold statement, but they just suck. There's no chance unless they draft, somebody crazy and he, goes for 40 touchdowns. It's just not going to happen.
Right.
But between those three teams, I think you're underselling Pittsburgh, believe it or not. I mean, let me tell you, ain't nobody thought Pittsburgh was going to go anywhere this year. Nobody. This was not a team that was talked about very much. But it's a very solid team. They only lost James Conner, who did not perform. He barely did anything all year. They did lose Juju. They re-signed Juju, I believe.
Yeah, they re-signed him, but still, the Browns just got better, and you still have Lamar Jackson's only going to get better, I think, and Ben Roethlisberger's not getting any younger.
Yeah. See, and I completely agree with that. But I mean, the Ravens' defense is solid. Their offense is completely one-dimensional. They cannot throw the ball. They have no solid wide receivers, if we're being honest here. I mean, Marquise Brown is maybe a B level, maybe B minus.
Yeah.
Which is not a quality receiver in my eyes. I mean, to be one of the contenders in the NFL, you need to have a B plus A minus guy.
Yeah.
And even then, their run game isn't very good either. Lamar Jackson is not a run game. But the Browns look like the best team in the AFC North. But to me, they look like the best team in the AFC North last year as well. Despite only being one game behind Pittsburgh, I don't think they played as well as anybody expected them to. I think they had a fairly weak schedule, honestly.
Yeah.
Besides the first week, they had a really weak schedule, and they didn't perform.
Right.
They had tight wins against the Jags. They lost to the Steelers quite a bit, and I just talked up the Steelers, but it's still a team the Browns should be beating.
Yes.
I think all three of those teams have another chance. To me, the Browns need to win more than 12 games. 12 or more games. They cannot win another 11, not with the team that they have right now.
Yeah, absolutely, and especially with the extra week being put onto the season, that's going to be, add even more pressure with that playoff push. I'm very excited to see how these AFC North standings play out. We'll see how Clowney fits in with the Browns and their defense. This is going to be an awesome season for the Browns, I'm predicting, coming up. We'll see what happens. We'll also, Logan, we'll be talking about the NFL Draft. That's live. That'll be live from Cleveland, Ohio in a couple of weeks. That's going to be an awesome experience to talk about. But for now, for this week, Logan, that concludes our episode of the Cleveland Sports Show. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate all of your input. Once again, tremendous job. Another week, another fantastic job by you, Logan. Thank you so much for your time, and have a terrific rest of your weekend.
Thank you for having me. You as well.
Thanks, man. And that concludes, ladies and gentlemen, our episode of the Cleveland Sports Show. You probably just heard my phone beep because I just got off the phone with Mr. Purcell. Before I go, I want to talk to you about how you can access more of my work on NordoniaHills.news, because there's a lot more of where that came from with the Cleveland Sports Show, as well as my other work for NordoniaHills.news. So let's get it started here. Now, if you are on NordoniaHills.news, just go to the Contributors tab and go to my name. My name is the second one down. It's Darius Sethna. It's spelled Dariussethna. Once you click on my name, you'll be able to see all my work that I've done with NordoniaHills.news. You can see all my episodes of the Cleveland Sports Show. You can see some articles I've written. I actually, last week, published an article on NordoniaHills.news. I took a spring break trip to Atlanta, Georgia, and saw a Hawks game, basketball game, and I have an article about my entire experience with that. I also have, if you keep scrolling down, some broadcasts from this year from Nordonia Knights boys basketball. They had a terrific season this year, unfortunately losing in the playoffs early on. That they still had a very talented team. So if you want to check out those games, I did the play-by-play broadcasting for those games, so make sure you check those out. You can also, if you keep scrolling down, find some articles I wrote, some player bios on famous immigrant athletes, so make sure you check those articles out as well. You can also find the Cleveland Sports Show on my Twitter account. All my work is posted to my Twitter account as well. So if you're on Twitter, just type in the Twitter search bar my name. It's Darius Sethna, spelled Darayussethna. Or you can type in my Twitter handle. It's at Nordonia Sports. So once you type in either of those two, you'll be able to get to my Twitter page where all of my work is posted there as well. My podcasts, my basketball podcasts, as well as links to my articles. You'll be able to see them all. Also very happy to say that the Cleveland Sports Show podcast is on the NordoniaHills.News YouTube page. So if you ever find yourself on YouTube, just go to the Nordonia Hills News YouTube page, and all the episodes to my podcast will be on there as well. You can also locate the Cleveland Sports Show on Spotify. That's right. If you're on the go, no matter where you are, you can take the Cleveland Sports Show with you. If you miss an episode, and because you're on the road, you don't have to have that excuse anymore, because if you have Spotify, you've got the Cleveland Sports Show. Just type in my name in the Spotify search bar, spelled Darayussethna, and you'll be able to find all my podcast episodes in order for you to listen to, so you can get your Cleveland sports fixings on my Spotify channel. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes my latest episode of the Cleveland Sports Show. Thank you for joining me for another awesome week of podcasting. Special thanks once again to Mr. Logan Purcell. I appreciate all of the audience members. Thank you so much for your support and listening to me week in, week out. So excited for next week. Logan and I will be discussing more about the NBA. The WNBA season will be starting soon, so that'll be a lot of fun. We'll also have more to talk about the Indians as well. So until next week, ladies and gentlemen, have a terrific rest of your weekend. Have a wonderful day, whatever day it is you may be listening to this podcast, and we'll see you soon for another episode of the Cleveland Sports Show. This is Darius Sethna signing off. Take care, everyone.